Hola Dominica. We are here this morning at the Cuban embassy with an exclusive interview. This is His Excellency Miguel Fraga, and he has so graciously accepted to speak with us today on the eve of 30 years of diplomatic relations between Dominica and Cuba. The actual anniversary will be on Monday the 18th, and it will celebrate 30 years of diplomatic relations. Good morning, ¿cómo está usted?
Oh, hey. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming today for this interview. It's a pleasure for me. Welcome to the Cuban embassy.
Thank you, and I'm very excited that you accepted to have us here. So you've been here for about 3 years now?
2 years. 2 years.
2
I
years.
arrived in February 2024.
So can you tell us what is your favorite part of Dominica so far?
I have to say the people, because of the relation that we have. And when I visit every place, I found the love and people here that have a connection with Cuba because they have been going to Cuba and they are a graduate in Cuba, or they have they have going to Cuba for healthcare, or they go to the hospital here, or they met Cubans who live here. So there is a real connection, but also the beautiful island, because this is a beautiful place.
And you mentioned some of the ways that Dominica and Cuba have collaborated over the years. You did mention going to Cuba for healthcare and so on. Can you just once again if you were to just tell us what this 30 years of diplomatic relations has been for both countries?
I think we are going to celebrate on May 18 the 30th anniversary when we formally start the diplomatic relations. But if you go back in history, you're going to know that in 1979, so after 1 year after your independence,
yes.
The first student from Dominica arrived to Cuba, and they were the pioneers. So there is a beautiful history between both countries. We have been working in many areas, as you mentioned, healthcare, education, agriculture. Every time that Dominica has need the collaboration and the solidarity of Cuba, we have been here. Everybody remembers, unfortunately, when the Hurricane Maria hit Dominica, we sent our people here, and you were able to welcome construction workers, people that work in the electricity system. So there are many links between Cuba and Dominica, and as I mentioned before, I am happy to see more Cubans who are coming here and live here in Dominica.
And even as you mentioned, the Cubans who are living in Dominica, how would you say their assimilation in Dominica has been?
Well, I think that they like Dominica, and we have so many things in common. I will say that the love for the music, so there are cultural links between our two countries, love for sports. There are many things, I will say, and we are neighbors, so there are common things, the Caribbean Sea that we share, but also the beautiful of the nature. You are the nature island, but we are also proud of our how we protect the environment in Cuba and the beautiful beaches that we have in our country. So when people come here and I talk with them, they feel at home, and they feel some similarities, and it's not so difficult. For me, for example, I come from the capital city in Cuba, and we don't have mountains in the capital city, but in part of the island in Cuba we have. So coming here is like to be, I don't know, in Santiago de Cuba, which is a big province in my country.
Okay, so it reminds you a lot
Yes,
of home.
yes.
Now, coming back to the diplomatic relations, what would you say is the greatest achievement of Cuba in relation to Dominica? What is the greatest thing that Cuba has done for Dominica?
I will say that we believe in solidarity, we believe in cooperation, we believe in collaboration, and not only with Dominica, because as probably many people knows, Cuba is famous because of the solidarity that we are always practicing towards almost every country in the world. When you talk about, for example, health collaboration, the history shows that we have been able to work in 165 countries. We have sent 600,000 Cuban collaborators abroad. Here in Dominica, we have been here almost for 30 years, the Cuban Medical Collaboration Program. And again, when you see, for example, the numbers from last year, the Cuban health collaborators saved more than 100 lives here in Dominica. That is something that we are proud of, you know. And again, this is just, I don't want to say help, I want to say solidarity, because it's not only from Cuba to Dominica. We also have the opportunity to receive from Dominica. And in this world, you know, we are living in a very difficult moment, in very difficult times. When you see solidarity between two small islands with limited resources, you really can't believe that a better world is possible.
And are there any activities planned for Monday?
Well, I don't know still if we can do something on Monday, because we are going to have several meetings to commemorate that, and also with, you know, with the Guild of Graduates, and also with the Solidarity Movement. But we are trying to find the best, because Monday probably is not a good day to do too many parties, you know, after the weekend. But yes, we are going to commemorate, and this is also part of the idea, you know, to try to speak with the media, to talk about this history that we have in common for the last 30 years. But I say more than 30 years. More than 30 years.
Yes. And as you mentioned, the Guild of Students, we have quite a few medical students who, I'm thinking of Dr. Damien Dublin, one of the very distinguished graduates from Cuba. Would you have figures? Would you be able to tell us how many medical graduates we have had from Cuba so far?
Since 1979, so far we have more than 400 graduated, more than 130 in medicine. So that's are big numbers for a country like Dominica. And again, every place I visit, there is a connection. And the other day I visited the hospital, and a lot of the staff there have a connection with Cuba. They have been studying in Cuba. Probably you remember, you are young, but we in the 90s we sent nurses from Cuba to train nurses here. So they didn't have to travel to Cuba. They were training here by Cuban nurses. So there has been a connection for several years. And again, for example, I know that programs for different areas, like your people hearing the meteorologist station in Gimit. I know they have been in Cuba, or they have received people from Cuba to train there. So there are many areas, and I am grateful to be in a country that has so much in common, and so beautiful connection with my country.
Okay, and you just mentioned that there are some meteorologists who have been trained. Are there any areas for future collaboration between Dominica and Cuba?
You know, to be honest, I have been trying to explain this many times. We are, I don't know, this is a joke, if we can learn cricket from Dominica, because cricket is not a popular sport in Cuba, but I really believe that almost every area is good for collaboration. I'm thinking, for example, in tourism, and thinking, for example, in agriculture, where we have here already a mission. Some Cuban specialists have been working here for the past year, and I believe they have accomplished a lot. But climate change, for example, we as I mentioned before, we are neighbors, and we face the same challenges. Almost every hurricane or every major weather
Disaster.
storm
Yeah.
that affect Dominica, affect Cuba.
Yes.
And we have some expertise working with this, but we also need to learn what you do. And now, for example, we share this early alert because the most important thing, and we are now ready to see another hurricane season.
Yes.
The most important thing is to save life, to
Yes.
preserve the human life. And Cuba has some expertise on that, and we have shared that with Dominica. And I'm happy to see that, for example, every time now that you have a storm, you alert the people. But again, in many areas, even in culture, I would love to see more interchange because the other day I was in the Jazz Creole Festival.
Oh, you were.
And Creole is not, is not so popular in Cuba, but jazz, yes.
Okay,
Jazz, we have
okay.
very good jazz musicians. And again, they're almost every area. If I have to mention, I will say agriculture, tourism, health, because you have good professionals here. Some of them has been training in Cuba, but after they finish in Cuba, they come here and they learn other things. And again, every area is important. We need, this is not only valid for Cuba or Dominica, this is valid for the whole world. We need to learn from each other.
Yes.
And we need to share our resources.
Yes.
And when you are small, when you have limited resources and you share, you are
You
more
accomplish much.
exactly,
together.
and you are more
Yes,
strong,
yes.
and you are more capable to face the challenges, the huge challenges that we have in this difficult world.
So are you saying, Ambassador, that for next year Jazz and Creole Festival you can recommend some jazz artists from Cuba?
I would love to see. We have a challenge in this case that is is real expensive. The air tickets when you
Yes,
have to go,
yes,
we don't have direct flights, and
Yes.
this is something that is common for the Caribbean. It's not
Yes.
only with Dominica, but if you want, for example, to go to Cuba, you have to travel to Barbados, or you have to travel to Trinidad, and probably you have to travel to Panama, and so that is something that for the future we need to see what we can do, because there's so much that we can share, but we have real challenges that make more difficult. So probably it's more easy for you to go to another country and not to
Yes,
Cuba.
yes.
And it's the same among the Caribbean. Sometimes you have to travel to Barbados to go to another
Yes.
island. So, but yes, I would love to see jazz musicians from Cuba here. I would love to see, because I am learning and enjoying your music. But it's something that I know that if we send it to Cuba, people is going to enjoy,
Okay.
because we are Caribbean too.
Yes.
And we have a Caribbean festival, and I know that in the past people from Dominica has been there, and it's amazing when you see that fusion between both nations.
And if we were to, change the tone of the interview a bit,
Please.
you mentioned the challenges. We are quite aware of the economic blockade affecting Cuba right now. Can you just tell us what it's like for the average Cuban?
I have to say that right now we are facing a very difficult situation. We have been under U.S. sanctions for more than 60 years, but this is not, sanctions as usual. Unfortunately, since January 29th, the U.S. administration put in place a blockade, an oil blockade, which we believe and we say that is a genocide. Because in the 21st century, if you don't allow people to get oil, you are not talking only about transportation. You are talking about oil that you need to produce energy, and you are talking about energy that we use for hospitals, for schools, for everything, and the situation is difficult. I always recommend, if you can talk with your students in Cuba, they can explain probably better about the current situation that we have. We're talking about blackouts that last 10, 15, 20 hours right now during these days, because in the last 4 months we only get one ship with oil. We produce oil, but it's a small quantities, and it's a very heavy oil that we use to produce energy, but only allows us to produce like 50% of what we need. We are a big island, 10 million of people, and only receiving one ship of oil in the last 4 months has been difficult for us. And this is not because we don't have the money or people don't want to send oil to Cuba. It's because the U.S. sanctions. They, with this order from President Trump on January 29, they threat every country that wants to send oil to Cuba with sanctions. And of course, countries want to protect the companies, their business. And this is the situation that we have. It's very difficult right now, but we are keep fighting, and it's amazing to see what we have been able to accomplish. For example, we are trying to give more space to the clean energies, to the solar energy. So China has been helping Cuba and other countries sending technology to Cuba, and we can say right now that we have more than 1,000 megawatts in solar energy. So what that means is that we have been able to put solar panels in schools, in hospitals, in small clinics, in banks. Because imagine if you don't have electricity, nothing works. Nothing works. And this is, something that I mentioned before, is genocide, because it's not against the Cuban government. The people that is affecting the most is the people of Cuba. So you can compare the numbers from 10 years ago, and our infant mortality was 4. Infant mortality was 4 children per 1,000 birth, and right now it's almost the double. And you can see that our life expectancy is going down. We have like more than 70 years of life expectancy, but we used to have like 78, 79.
But what has contributed to that?
The sanctions. The sanctions, because it's more difficult for us to trade, to acquire everything that we need. Because the companies don't want to be under U.S. sanctions. So, and it's happening here in Dominica. For example, the Cubans who are here, they complain that they cannot send money to Cuba. You have, for example, Western Union here, but you cannot send money directly to Cuba because of the U.S. sanctions. You have to have someone in the United States, and you have to send the money to the United States, and from the United States, probably they can send it to Cuba. But that means that you need to spend more money. And this is only one example. For example, your students in Cuba are not able to use their cards from the bank, debit or credit cards, because they are under sanctions of the U.S. So it's not only affecting, because they say, oh, it's only to affect the Cuban government. No, it's affecting the Cuban people, and it's affecting almost everybody. They don't allow Americans to go to Cuba as tourism. You need a license to go to Cuba. Tourism is #1 industry in Cuba. I have to mention this, during President Obama, we established diplomatic relations with the United States. We were able to sign more than 20 agreements between Cuba and the United States, and even with the sanctions in place, we were able to demonstrate that we were able to advance in many areas. And during those days, we get almost 4 million of tourists from worldwide, but 1 million from the U.S. I always mention 600,000 Americans and 400,000 Cuban Americans came in 1 year to Cuba. You imagine how important was that for the Cuban economy. We saw a development in many areas in our country because companies were able to do business with Cuba. But after that, everything changed when President Trump came to power, and we had the COVID-19 pandemic, and that affected everybody. But during those years, the U.S. administration put more than 200 new sanctions against our country, and that prevent us to really overcome the effects of the pandemic.
Okay.
And now you see what is happening in the world. The war in Iran or against Iran is affecting everybody. When you see what is happening with the oil prices, with the fertilizer prices, so imagine if that affect everybody, how that affect Cuba.
Yes, yes.
Because again, when companies do business with Cuba, they always charge extra because of the risk that they are taking because they are doing business with Cuba.
And what has been the administration's response, the Cuban administration's response?
I think that well, we always say our government is trying to do everything that we can because we are not going to surrender our independence, our principles. And for example, in this case, as I mentioned before, we are trying to do a space in our economy for the clean energies. It's a very expensive technology. It's difficult because we have to acquire this in overseas. But in the last year, you can see an increase in our production of clean energies. So it's not only solar energy, it's also wind. We are trying to put some wind parks in our country, and also we're doing everything that we can. Just one example, what we did for example with the students of medicine that we have from Dominica and Cuba, we send them to the hospitals. So because of this blackouts and all this situation, right now they are in the hospitals, so they have classes in the morning, but also they have practices all day because they are in the field, in the hospital. So we are doing everything that we can to overcome this, but it's really difficult in this situation. And we have countries that want to send or sell oil to Cuba, but they are worried about the sanctions, the U.S. sanctions.
But does this mean that, for example, with the oil situation, does it mean that the administration will not, because I think what the Americans are saying is that like even the oil and so on, they go towards, the profits go towards supporting the regime. So and we can also give another example with the medical brigade. I think the Americans are saying that I don't remember the word that they used, but I think they're saying that the professionals are not being paid, you know, it's more going towards the administration. So is the administration's response that these won't change? I know, for example, Dominica response, Dominica said both our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Prime Minister said that the contracts with the Cuban administration has to be reviewed. So in that case, Dominica will have contracts with the professionals themselves. So the question is, from the administration point of view, they're not willing to make any compromise so that the sanctions may be lifted?
Let me. I think those are very important questions, and let me address this very, very clear. U.S. always say that Cuba used the sanctions as an excuse, and we always say remove the excuse, remove the sanctions. Let us prove if we are capable or not to have a good economy. About what you say before. Right now, for example, if you go to the international media, you're going to read that the U.S. State Department offered to Cuba 100 millions in aid to Cuba. You know how much the sanctions cost to Cuba? $7 billion the last year. So you offer 100 millions, and your sanctions are cost is $7 billion. So the Cuban society, how we work, this money is not for the Cuban regime. It's for the Cuban schools, it's for the Cuban hospital, because we have free healthcare free education. No, more than 80% of the Cuban population is owner of their homes, and they don't pay any taxes for that. So it's a different system. And I always say, you know, Cuba is not a threat for the United States because we are not a military superpower. We don't have nuclear weapons, but we are a moral threat because we prove that another system is possible, and you can achieve what I mentioned before, the infant mortality, the life expectancy, and many other things. How a small country like Cuba is able to send doctors to 165 countries, and the United States cannot do that. The United States at the same time only invade, and look what is happening here in the Caribbean. You have so far like 200 people that has been killed in the Caribbean Sea because they say that this is drug trafficking. They don't prove, they don't offer any proof, but they say that. And about the Cuban doctors, I wrote an article that was published in Dominican News Online that explained this situation. It's not true that the Cuban brigade here don't receive the money. You can check with the National Bank. Everybody has their personal account, and the money goes directly to them. We're talking about a stipend because this is an help. This is a collaboration, so they don't get a salary for this.
It is a stipend.
Here, they receive a stipend, and we don't take a dime from that stipend.
But is the stipend that they're receiving, is it measurable to the work that they're putting in?
I will say yes, and also they still get the salary in Cuba because they get their salary in Cuba and an stipend here, and they receive all the facilities. To be honest, but I would like you to ask them directly, and nobody, because they say this is you know, a slave work. It's not true. Everybody that comes here comes because they want to come. This is something that we are trying to have in our country. People that is you know, willing to go and help. And this is part of the Cuban solidarity all these 60 years after the revolution. And I say this, I am proud of the Cuban doctors, but I am proud also of the Cuban people that went to Africa to fight for independence. And this is not people that were part of the military or the army. This was people that were volunteers to fight in Africa. So about the brigade, again, they have been here for 30 years. You can see the numbers of how many lives they save, how many births they attend, how many surgical operations. And the United States never say nothing about that. And they never offer to replace the Cuban doctors, or they never offer to scholarships to your people to go to the United States to study. So they are really worried about the Cuban presence here, or they want to affect, because these Cuban collaborators that are here with the stipend, they are helping their families in Cuba. And that is, of course, one of the reasons that why they are here, to help the Cuban families, but also because they believe in what they are doing. But let me put another example, not Dominica, Haiti. We have been in Haiti for so many years. When the earthquake, probably you remember that every day you can read in the media what everybody was doing to send help to Haiti. They don't mention Cuba. You know why? Because the day before the earthquake, we had 400 doctors in Haiti. So we didn't need, we don't have to send more help. The help was already there. And even now, with this difficult situation that you see in Haiti, our Cuban doctors are there. Do you believe it's because of money? Because of, you know? So there is a campaign. And we always say, if you want to know the truth about Cuba, go to Cuba. Go to Cuba. And for that reason, they don't allow Americans to go to Cuba. Americans can go wherever they want. They can go to countries they have been in war with, but not to Cuba, because they don't want to see. They don't want Americans to see what is happening in Cuba.
So do you think that in the foreseeable future that these sanctions won't be lifted, that some agreement won't come to be?
I will say that we proved during President Obama that that is possible. Because, as I mentioned before, the last 2 years of President Obama, when we established diplomatic relations, we signed more than 20 agreements. And we saw that American companies wants to do business with Cuba. We signed an agreement to have 120 flights per day between US and Cuba. You know how important it is for you to have this American flight, American airline flight? Well, we have Delta, JetBlue, American, Southwest, almost Alaska Air was traveling a direct flight between LA and Havana, Los Angeles and Havana, once per week. We have all the major cruise companies going to Cuba. We have one hotel that was managed by a US company. We signed agreements with Google to improve the speed of internet in Cuba. So we proved that we were not afraid of relations with the United States. Unfortunately, there is a minority in United States that don't want Americans to see what the example of Cuba, what the example of Cuba means, and they try to avoid every approach between United States and Cuba.
Well, thank you so very much, Ambassador, for speaking with us here this morning. Again, we said on the eve of 30 years of diplomatic relations between Cuba and Dominica. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope to have more of these conversations with you, Ambassador.
I just want to say thank you to the people of Dominica for all this love. And every day we know that the people of Dominica is worried about Cuba, they care about Cuba, and thanks also to the authorities of Dominica, because we have accomplished a lot, and this is only the first 30 years of diplomatic relations. We can do more in the future.
Definitely, and we look forward to that.
Thank you so much.
So once again, thank you.
Real pleasure.
And goodbye.